Marinero, the Sick Podcast, on the Sunday, the 13th of June, the day before the Montreal Canadiens take on the Vegas Golden Knights in the semifinals. Joining me right now from the Montreal Gazette newspaper, Stu Cowan. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, Tony. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much.
The NHL season, but I'm doing well.
The NHL regular season started in mid-January. If I would have told you the week before the season started that come semis, Tampa Bay would play the Islanders and the Vegas Golden Knights would play the Montreal Canadiens. If I would have told you that then, you would have said what exactly?
Well, I wouldn't have been totally shocked. I wrote a column at the start of the season, and I think, if I remember right, I picked the Canadiens to finish second in the North Division behind Toronto, but I also picked them to win the North Division in the playoffs with nothing more than, well, the offseason changes look good, and also I figured Montreal needed some positive news in the middle of the COVID, and I figured that, why not? I said, why not can they make it? So, but the way this season went, there was obviously periods where that didn't look like it was going to happen. I mean, we remember that the first 10 games of the season, everybody was talking about the Canadiens being right where they are now, the way they looked, and then obviously, the wheels fell off, everything fell apart, and this was not a good hockey team. I've written many times, the only consistent thing about the Canadiens was their inconsistency after the first 10 games. But for whatever reason, against Toronto, I picked the Leafs in 5, and I was a Nick Suzuki overtime goal away from getting that right. But since then, this team is just on a roll. And, as people have said, it brings back memories of '93 with all the overtime wins. A team that wasn't expected to do much when they got in the playoffs. They got on a roll, and they couldn't be stopped. And, Patrick Roy was outstanding in goal, and now it's the same thing with Carey Price. So there are similarities going back. So at the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have been totally shocked. Halfway through the season, I would have figured there's no chance the Canes would be where they are right now.
It's the Sick Podcast. I'm Marinero, and the show is brought to you by Essentia, the world's only natural memory foam mattress. Go to myessentia.com/sickpod and see why Essentia is the mattress of choice for many athletes, including over 25% of professional hockey players. Use code SICKPOD for a free pillow with your purchase. Essentia, beyond organic sleep, with Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette. Stu, if we forget for a second everything that happened in the regular season, we forget about the firing of Claude Julien and the firing of Kirk Muller, the firing of Stéphane Waite, the 25 games in 44 days or whatever it was, the ups and downs. Let's wash out the regular season. Go back to the team that played in the playoffs and was eliminated by Philadelphia in 6. And now add Tyler Toffoli, Josh Anderson, Joel Edmondson, Jake Allen, Corey Perry, Alexander Romanov, who hasn't played a lot, I get it, only one game, Eric Stahl at the deadline, and Cole Caulfield right before the deadline. So if we forget about the season, but think about last year's playoffs and then all the additions, if you look at it from that perspective, we really shouldn't be surprised, should we?
No, and the common denominator the last 3 times the Habs have been in the playoffs is Carey Price has been outstanding. He was outstanding when they lost in the first round of the Rangers, 2017, I believe it was. He was outstanding last year. He's outstanding again this year. Just this year he's getting more offensive support, and a lot of that has to do with the guys you mentioned. Marc Bergevin mentioned yesterday when he spoke with the media on Zoom that it's not an accident that he added 6 guys with Stanley Cup rings to this roster. He figured this is a team, some young players, they needed some experience, they needed some playoff experience. And, we were speaking earlier, one of the turning points for the Canes might have been the speeches that were made before Game 5 when, Eric Stahl spoke, Corey Perry spoke, apparently Shea Weber spoke, and Corey Perry basically just saying, guys, don't take this for granted. You never know when or if you'll ever get back in a position like this in the playoffs. So, make sure you leave everything out there. Philip Deneau saying that he looked in the mirror and figured, no, we don't want our season to end like this. Like this, everything we've been through this year. The COVID, the positive COVID test for Joel Armia, the 25 games in 44 days, the way Carey Price has played, like we can't let it end like this. And it lit a spark. I mean, Game 4 against Toronto, the Canadiens had no compete. It looked like they were just going to roll over and die. There was no reason to believe they were going to come back in Game 5, never mind win this series in 7 games. And as you mentioned, the guys they've added, it's sort of still shocking to me that they didn't have Cole Caulfield in the lineup for the first 2 games. I'll never really understand that decision. But yeah, it's this is right now a good hockey team. The fact they're all healthy and the fact that Dominic Ducharme has been able to basically stick with 4 set lines, which is the key to playing his system, which is quite physically demanding. He wants puck support all over the ice, work as a group of 5, And he never really had set lines because of all the injuries. And now he has, with, the exception of Tatar went out and then they put Evans in and then Evans got hurt and they put Lehkonen in. But yeah, with the 4 lines and the way they're rolling, my biggest concern going into the series against Vegas is Jeff Petry's situation. As you mentioned, he's not going to play game 1. They don't know when he'll be back. And just the way Ducharme has relied so heavily on his, the big 4 with minutes. With one of those guys missing, it's going to be tough, especially against a team like Vegas. So Carey Price is going to have to continue to play the way he has, if not even better.
This is what they're going to have to do, and everyone knows that every game is so important, Stu, and every win, but they're going to have to win game 1 without Jeff Petry. That's exactly what they're going to have to do.
They got to win 1 or 2 in Vegas. I mean, I'm sure you watch the games in Vegas. I'm sure the viewers out there watching. That's a crazy atmosphere. I've been there before, before COVID, covering the Canadians. It's a fantastic atmosphere in that building. It's a Vegas show, and the hockey game is part of the show. I mean, the pregame show is spectacular. The fans are crazy. They love hockey. When I was there last year with the Canadians, the first intermission was the Blue Man Group Entertainment. The second intermission was Cirque du Soleil. It's a show.
Wow.
And the fans, I'll tell you a quick story. I took an Uber ride from the rink back to my hotel in Vegas, and the Uber driver, he asked what I was in town for. I said I'm from Montreal covering hockey. And he said, hockey. He said, man, I love hockey. I said, well, did you love hockey before Vegas got a team? He said, no, man. He said, man, my buddy phoned me up. He had tickets for the game and asked me if I wanted to go. I was like, hockey? I don't want to go see hockey, man. He said, but I went, and it's unbelievable. And he just ranted and raved about how fantastic hockey was and how much he loved it and how he wished he could go more, but tickets are expensive. So he's sort of hoping to go more often. But Vegas, who would have thunk it, right? Vegas has become a hockey town. Players want to play there. The atmosphere is just spectacular, and the players feed off it, and it's going to be, I don't want to say a shock, but I mean, the Canadians haven't played in front of, they played in front of 500 fans in Toronto, they played in front of 500 fans in Winnipeg, and then the 2,500 at the Bell Center. There's going to be 18,000 fans in Vegas going crazy. So I think they got to win one of the two. It's going to be tough to win game 1 without Petry, but I think for them to have a chance in the series, they're going to have to win one of the 2 first games in Vegas.
It's a sick podcast. I'm Tony Marinaro. Shout out to Excellent Photo, centrally located close to downtown shopping and universities. Ships to all of Canada. Professional staff at the store and online to help you choose the gear you really need. I guess we'll find out more in about a week's time, Stu. But if you take a look at a picture here, the 1 week break. Well, once again, we'll know more once this series is over. Are you worried that it's going to kind of halt the momentum the Canadians had going?
I think it will, and we saw it with Winnipeg, and we've seen it in previous playoffs where teams have swept the series and had a week off. And I think players get into that routine. In the playoffs, it's set. You play every second day. They get into the routine. You play the game. The next day, you might have a short practice, some video, play again the next day, and you get into that groove. And they were into that groove, and I think they took advantage of that and caught the Jets in the first couple of games. So I think it's going to be difficult. I think it's going to be hard for them after a week off, especially going into that environment, like I mentioned in Vegas, where it's going to be absolutely insane there. It's going to be tough. They got to really come out and have a good start to game 1. And I think the first goal is going to be really key to try and take the fans out of it a bit. If Vegas scores early, you just know it's going to be insanity in there. And it's going to be really tough for the Canadians to fight back.
Even though Marc Bergevin tried to explain it, it had a lot of people scratching their heads that Stéphane Waite was fired, the goalie coach, several months ago after the second period. And the fact that, that it was done and the way it was done, all of that stuff. Seeing Carey Price rebound, are you willing to say already that the move was justified and that Bergevin got it right? Or are you leaning towards Carey Price plays well in the playoffs pretty much more often than not?
Well, my feeling about this, I don't think Sean Burke came in and all of a sudden made Carey Price a better goalie. Carey Price has been a fantastic goalie for many years. What I think happened there, the timing of firing a goalie coach in the middle of a game is so bizarre. But, I know that Stéphane Waite did an interview with your colleague Mitch Melnick after he was fired, and he said that Bergevin had told him one of the reasons he was firing, he said you had to get Carey Price going, and if you didn't get Carey Price going, Bergevin was going to be the next guy to get fired at the end of the season. So, it's hard to explain regular season Carey Price versus playoff Carey Price. As I mentioned earlier, he's been fantastic in the playoffs the last 3 years. The regular season, he's been so inconsistent. And you have to wonder if it's a mental thing. Does he get bored? Does he like what goes on? How can he be so inconsistent in the playoffs? Not just this year, but the last 3 or 4 years, and then play so well in the playoffs. So I personally, I think that Bergevin might have intentionally fired Stefan Waite during a game to get Carey Price's attention. I think him and Stefan Waite were close. They've been working together for so long, and I think Bergevin knew he had to rattle Price's cage or do something to just wake him up. And I think in hindsight, we look back and maybe that worked. Maybe Price did wake up. He was close with Stefan Waite. He didn't know Waite had been fired until after the game that night. So I think Bergevin, with his job possibly on the line, he's the guy who gave $84 million to Carey Price and realized that if Price doesn't start playing, this team isn't going to make the playoffs and I'm going to be out of a job. And I think he felt he had to get Carey Price's attention, and it certainly looks like he did, not only by firing Stefan Waite, but by firing him in the middle of a game.
For your licensed sports apparel, you can go to sportbuffshop.com for all of your officially licensed sports apparel and more. Use code 615 for 15% off on all of their items, and that would include Montreal Canadiens gear. With Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette on the Sick Podcast, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Sick Podcast. Stu, that's not a terrible theory, you know that? The fact that, even though he tried to explain it, that if you're Carey Price, you say to yourself, how bad was I in game for the general manager to fire my goalie coach in game? Talk about rattling the cage. It's not all that crazy to think about. By the way, Stefan Waite was here on the Sick Podcast as well, and one of the things that really caught my attention was that when he also added that Price has had so many injuries over the past couple of years that his ability to play back-to-back, his ability to play 3 and 4, and whether or not he's going to be here long-term and finish out that contract, those are comments that really caught my attention. The fact that Price has played as well as he's played back-to-back 3 and 4, like I thought before the Toronto series what happened, Stu, this is not during the series, but before the series, I thought we were going to see Jake Allen because there was a back-to-back situation, and on 2 occasions, 3 games in 4 nights. And the fact that we didn't see him, and the fact that Price has played the way he's played, wow, hats off. I have to tell you, since Carey Price won those 4 individual awards, I've never seen him play hockey like this, ever.
No, and you're absolutely right. And another thing I think with him this season, Carey Price doesn't like to give up his net. Like he wants to play all the time. And what Stefan Waite said, obviously they had those discussions with Marc Bergevin and Claude Julien and later Dominic Ducharme that you can't play Carey as much as they have in the past. So he shared the net pretty equally with Jake Allen. And I think Price had a hard time adjusting to that also. I think it threw off his rhythm. I think he was used to playing 5 games in a row and then maybe have a game off. But then Jake Allen came in. The Canes wouldn't be in the playoffs right now without Jake Allen. I mean, he carried them when Price was injured and he wasn't playing well. So, yeah, and going forward, when you see Carey Price in the locker room, or when we were allowed in the locker room before COVID, he's a big guy. Like, he's built like an NFL tight end. He's 6'3", 225, whatever. He's a big, big man. And most goalies, you look at Marc-Andre Fleury, they're sort of built like Gumby, a bit like gymnasts almost, right? They're so flexible. And when I watch Carey Price do the splits in that, I'm a pretty big guy. I'm like 6'3", 220. Like, how does a guy that size, that flexible? I have no fly. I'm not a fraud, but most big guys aren't very flexible. And but just the weight, like when he drops down to his knees, like however many 100 times in a game, never mind practice, that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of pounding on the knees, on the hips, on the joints, and it's taken its toll. And not only he's played a lot of games in the Olympics and a lot of games in World Cups and stuff like that. There's a lot of wear and tear in his body. And moving forward, they're not going to be able to play him, maybe 2 out of every 3 games. They're going to have to manage him going forward. So he's going to have to learn to deal with that. He's going to have to learn to stay focused and stay sharp and accept the fact that he can't play as much as he used to be. He's not a 22, 23-year-old goalie anymore. And listen to what Bergevin and the coaching staff and the goalie coaches are telling him about the importance of having time up, and mentally he's got to accept that, and he's got to be able to do that because, Carey Price in the playoffs, fantastic, is great, but if they don't get to the playoffs, it doesn't matter. So that's why I think Jake Allen, there's a reason why Bergevin signed him to that contract extension once he signed him. It's going to be interesting to see what he can do to avoid having Seattle pick him up in the expansion draft. But this team needs Carey Price and they need Jake Allen or somebody like Jake Allen moving forward because you can't expect Carey Price to play 55, 60 games anymore.
You can follow us on YouTube and podcast platforms, The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. He's Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette. A couple of days ago, Brendan Gallagher said, Mr. Gainey came in to talk to us, and we were like, whoa, where did that come from? Stu, over the last couple of years, several alumni have gone on record as saying, it doesn't look like this management team and their staff want us around all that much. How surprised were you to hear that Bob Gainey went in to speak to the team? Because I have to tell you, I was shocked.
Yeah, I was very surprised also. I mean, you go right back to Marc Bergevin. I mean, Larry Robinson wanted to coach here. Larry Robinson wanted to be the defensive coach here, and Marc Bergevin picked J.J. Daigneault over him. I mean, there's two sides of the story. Bergevin will tell you one story, Robinson will tell the other story. But Larry Robinson, I've spoken with him, and he wanted to be assistant coach of the Canadiens in charge of the defense. There might have been a fear that Michel Therrien at the time would be looking over his shoulder, thinking Larry would be the next head coach. But in my speaking with Larry had no interest in being head coach of the Kings. He doesn't want to deal with us. He doesn't want to deal with the media. He just wants to show up, coach. That's it, And for whatever reason, Bergevin didn't want him around. I think it was a huge mistake. I think the PK Subban story might have been a little different if Larry Robinson had been around to guide him at that point. But yeah, I've heard from other former Habs also. It's almost like the Canadiens don't want them around, and it's. Like, why? Like, why would you not want these guys around? Why wouldn't you want them talking to the players and being around the team and whatnot? So yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise, and especially Bob Gainey, and good for Gainey for accepting it. He's a guy who's been through a lot in his life and in his career, and his ending here with the Canadiens wasn't the greatest as a GM. So kudos to him for doing it, and for the guy. I don't know if Gallagher was supposed to say that he did, because the next day we were asking Dominic Ducharme if any other players were going to speak, and he didn't want to talk about it. He said it's internal. Maybe when the playoffs are over, we'll tell you what's going on.
Yeah,
so they might have let one slip there, but good on Gainey for doing it, and good on Marc Bergevin for bringing it in. Because one of the things that I've been critical about with Marc Bergevin is he refuses to admit when he makes a mistake. A lot of times, I think back, Dwight King in the playoffs in 2017. He might be the worst player I've seen on the Canadiens since I've been covering them. And he kept playing him in the playoffs and playing him. It's like he wouldn't accept that he wasn't the player that he thought he was. We saw a similar sort of thing with Eric Staal this year, although Eric Staal has really picked up his game in the playoffs and been a difference. But with Marc Bergevin, he's a stubborn guy. He likes to do things his way. I think sometimes he takes things personally. I think he wanted, I know Serge Savard had a big say with Jeff Molson and Bergevin getting the job. And I know Savard was upset afterwards that he wasn't involved. I read Savard's book recently. He was upset that he wasn't, Bergevin. He told Bergevin, call me anytime you need anything, if you want anything, and he never heard from him again. And that's sort of upset Serge a bit if you read his book. But now maybe they've turned the page on that. And I think bringing Bob Gainey in was a great idea for these kids. Imagine Cole Caulfield, 20 years old, and Bob Gainey walks into the locker room. Like, wow. So good for the Canadiens for doing that.
It's obvious what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to, and maybe not as defensive, but they're trying to take a lot of what the New Jersey Devils were all about in the early 2000s and bring that over to present day type of thing. And when they won the Stanley Cup in '86, Jacques Lemaire had a lot of influence on Jean Perron. Jacques Lemaire was an assistant to Serge Savard at the time, or a special advisor. By the way, he's occupying the same role now to Lou Lamoriello with the New York Islanders. Not a lot of people know that, but he is. So I'm not surprised that they're there. And by the way, I wouldn't be shocked if the New York Islanders won the Stanley Cup either. Stranger things have happened. It looks like New Jersey all over again, but they're going with the whole team concept and everyone play for each other and play the right way. And don't make mistakes with the puck, or try and limit them as much as you can. And I'm not, in that regard, I mean, if you're going to bring someone in and Lemaire is employed by the Islanders, I mean, the next best guy to bring in is Gainey, really.
Really, he is. I mean, that's, Dominic Ducharme said that he was this morning. He said, Bob Gainey is the type of player we want our team to play like as you said, they want guys to play the right way. They want guys to be defensively responsible. They want guys to be smart puck management. All the things Bob Gainey did, right? All the things Bob Gainey did. And it was interesting. I interviewed Steve Shutt a little while ago, and he was saying that, back in those teams in the 70s and the dynasties, everybody knew their role. Like he says, my role was to score. Bob Gainey's role was to check. And he said Gainey would get up in the room a lot of times and just say, guys, just do your job. Do what you're supposed to do. If you're supposed to score, score. If you're supposed to check, check. If you're supposed to hit. Do what you do best. And that built them together as a team. And all those parts sort of meshed together. And that's what we've seen with the Canadiens. Yeah. Dominic Ducharme all season, we've been Zoom conferences, trying to get him to explain exactly how his system works, how he wants it to go, and he's sort of, as I said, the puck man. The thing I really notice is the puck support, like all over the ice. You watch a game, there's two teams near the puck all the time, and we're starting to see now what he's sort of been trying to explain to us. We're seeing it visually. After I think it was after Game 7 against Toronto in the Zoom, I said, in the future when we ask you about your system, are you just going to say go watch Game 7 against Toronto? That's my system. And he sort of chuckled a bit, but I think that's what it is. And they've been able to play. I mentioned earlier, the only consistent thing about the Canadiens has been their inconsistency. But the last 7 games in the playoffs, they've been very consistent playing Ducharme's system. Obviously, the system works. You wonder if maybe some of the players wondered about it when he first came in. Brendan Gallagher said recently it was a lot to take in. Like he changed almost everything about the way they played.
Yeah.
And finally, things clicked in. That week off, I guess, where the playoffs might have helped. This week off, we were talking earlier about how it might hurt them. A way it might help them is just to fine-tune that system a little bit more, get it geared towards what Vegas does. So it's going to be interesting to see.
All right, in ending here, and speaking of Alumni, I bet you I know who they're going to bring in next. And I don't know this, but I'm going to take a guess. You ready?
Yeah.
Guy Carbonneau?
That would make total sense.
Yeah.
And when you talk, I bump into the old Habs sometimes, more so back when we were actually allowed in the Bell Center down near the locker room. And a lot of the guys were really upset with what was happening with the team. The guys, these guys bleed bleu, blanc, rouge still. A guy like Guy Carbonneau, they have such a pride in the team, and it hurts them when they see the team not doing well. It really does. And to see the team doing well now, I'm sure makes them happy. To have a guy like Bob Gainey speak to the team, I'm sure that all the other older guys around say, well, finally, about time they started doing that. And you have all these guys around. They have the alumni room not too far from where the Canadiens locker room is, the Bell Center. I don't think it's open now during COVID. We're not allowed down in that area as a media.
Yeah.
But the guys are right there. Like, they're right there. You see them, Yvon Lambert, you see Reggie Houle, you see all these guys at all the games. So it's not like you need to go looking for them. And hopefully moving forward, that's something the Canadiens will change, and they'll have more and keep more in touch with their former players. Maybe Marc Bergevin, on 9 years into the job, maybe has a little bit more. He's not as nervous about these guys sort of telling him what to do or interfering. So good for him.
All right, so if you were to place a bet on MyBookie, you go to mybookie.ag/the Sick Podcast and use code SickPicks for a 50% deposit bonus. Bet, win, get paid. Stu Cowan, Marc Bergevin, are you willing to say that they're going to extend this contract?
I would certainly think so. And I think it'll be tied with Dominic Ducharme. Bergevin has 1 more year left on his contract. I don't think Jeff Molson needs to give him like a 6-7 years, whatever it was he gave him the last time. 2-year extension, I think, which would be 3 years. Give Dominic Ducharme a 3-year contract. You got these guys for the next 3 years. Don't forget, this is a team that didn't deserve to be in the playoffs last year. They just got in because of the expanded format. You can make a pretty good argument they didn't deserve to get in this year. Again, they were the team with the worst record in the playoffs. Next year, back to the regular divisions, it's going to be hard for this team. Like, making the playoffs next year is going to be tough.
Yeah, it really is.
It's not going to be easy. So it wouldn't be shocking if the Canadiens missed the playoffs again next year. So I don't think you need to. Personally, if I was Jeff Molson, I wouldn't go more than a 2-year extension, which would give him 3 years. You also got to remember he's still, Molson's still paying Claude Julien $5 million next year not to coach.
Yeah.
So Dominic, I don't know if he wants to, not going to want to pay 2 GMs and maybe 3 coaches. Dominic Ducharme, without a ton of experience, won't be able to command the $5 million salary that Claude Julien did. Although if they win the Stanley Cup, maybe that'll change.
If they win the Stanley Cup, he's going to get more than a 2-year extension. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, in ending, give me a pick: Habs or Vegas?
As much as I'd love to see the Canadiens win, it'd be great for the city. It'd be great for the Gazette. It'd be great for this show. It'd be great for everybody.
Yeah.
I can't see them beating them. I think Vegas is just a better team. My pick is Vegas in 6, but I'd love to be proven wrong. And the Canadiens, they proved me wrong in the first series against Toronto. The second series, I had them winning. I didn't have them winning in 4. I had them winning in 6. But it's the playoffs, and stranger things have happened. So, if I was a betting man or like my pick, I'd say Vegas in 6, but I'd love to be proven wrong by the Canadiens.
I won't give a pick. I'll just tell you this. Ça sent la coupe. Ça sent la coupe. Ça sent la coupe, Stanley. Stu, me and you parade downtown Montreal. He's Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette. I'm Marinaro. It's the Sick Podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Sick Podcast. See you, Stu. Enjoy the playoffs.
Thanks, Tony. This was fun.
All right. Hope we can do it again. He's Stu Cowan. I'm Marinaro. The Sick Podcast. This host is sick. See you.